Imagine staring into the eyes of a man who tried to end your life, then choosing to sit across from him years later and ask him why. This isn't fiction, it's not a movie. It's a true story of survival, confrontation, and the unimaginable strength it takes to look into the face of evil and demand answers. This is the story of Lisa McVey, the only known survivor of a serial unaliver, who not only escaped, but helped bring him to justice. And then, she interviewed him. The girl who shouldn't have survived. It was November 3rd, 1984. 17-year-old Lisa McVey had just finished a shift at a donut shop in Tampa, Florida. She hopped on her bike for the ride home in the dark, alone. She didn't know it yet, but a man was watching her. That man was Bobby Joe Long, a serial offender responsible for a string of attacks and the lives of at least 10 women in the Tampa Bay area. Lisa was his next target. He forced her from her bike at gunpoint, blindfolded her, and shoved her into his car. He told her not to scream, that no one would hear her anyway. For the next 26 hours, Lisa was held captive, abused, terrified. But she never gave up. Even in the darkest moments, she knew if she panicked, she would not survive. So she became calm. She became smart. She studied him, his voice, his scent, the feel of the blindfold, the number of turns they took, the wallpaper in the room, the sounds outside. She asked him questions. She told him she cared about him. She pretended to understand him. She made herself human in his eyes. And then, something unexpected happened. He let her go. The escape and the chase. Lisa ran straight to the police. She gave them a detailed description of her abductor, everything from his speech patterns to the layout of his apartment. She even left behind evidence on purpose, her fingerprints on every surface she could touch, even under the toilet seat lid. Her testimony and calm thinking gave authorities their first real lead. Days later, Bobby Joe Long was arrested. The man who had taken so many lives was now in custody, because of one teenage girl who refused to break. And this wasn't just any man. He was methodical, strategic. He had altered his cars, changed his victims' locations. He was organized, the kind of person profilers feared most, but he underestimated Lisa McVey. Who was Bobby Joe Long? Bobby Joe Long was not a drifter or a madman off the street. He had a girlfriend, children, a job. He lived in plain sight. But behind closed doors, he had been attacking women for years. His spree in 1984 included the assaults and unaliving of multiple women, often posing as someone offering help, like a ride home or a fake phone call. His profile matched what criminal psychologists call an organized offender: intelligent, manipulative, and controlled. He had suffered a head injury in his youth, had an unusual hormonal condition, and he harbored deep resentment toward women. But even among seasoned profilers, his cruelty stood out. When caught, he confessed to 10 unalivings. But many believe the number was higher. Lisa's life after survival. You might expect Lisa McVey to vanish from the public eye after such a traumatic experience, but she didn't. Instead, she became a law enforcement officer. She dedicated her life to protecting others, especially children and survivors of abuse. Her story wasn't just about surviving, it was about using her pain to fuel purpose. She became a school resource officer, a mentor, an advocate. She spoke publicly about trauma, recovery, and inner strength. But there was one thing left she hadn't done. She hadn't faced him again. In 2019, Bobby Joe Long was scheduled for execution after decades on death row. Lisa was invited to witness it, but she requested something different. She wanted to speak to him, not to scream, not to curse, but to ask him questions. It wasn't about revenge, it was about closure, control, taking back power. She walked into the room where he sat, old now, shackled, fading, and she looked him in the eye. She told him, "You picked the wrong little girl," and then she walked out. He didn't speak. He barely looked at her because this time he wasn't in control. Lisa's story isn't just about survival, it's about what happens to the brain under trauma and how she rewired hers to stay alive. She disassociated to manage pain, she read her captor's emotional state, she used empathy as a weapon, making herself relatable to avoid harm. She used memory techniques to catalog her surroundings, she practiced controlled compliance, agreeing just enough to earn trust but never losing her sense of self. Experts say her actions were some of the most advanced survival tactics ever seen in a civilian abduction case. And she was only 17. She did what entire teams of trained agents hope victims will do, and most can't. The execution and the aftermath. On May 23, 2019, Bobby Joe Long was executed by lethal injection. Lisa McVey attended, sitting quietly. She didn't cheer, she didn't weep, she simply watched. And when it was over, she stood, walked outside and faced a crowd of reporters. She said, "I wanted to be the last face he saw, and the voice in his head as he left this world." That night she went home. She didn't celebrate. She went back to work the next day, protecting children, just like she always had. Because Lisa McVey doesn't live in fear. She is the fear, for those who would ever think of hurting someone again. Lisa McVey was taken, broken, and held against her will, but she didn't become a victim, she became a weapon. In a world of monsters, she became the storm. If Lisa's story left you speechless, if you felt the weight of her courage and the power of her silence, then don't leave just yet. Subscribe for more true stories like this, stories of survival, psychology, justice, and the human will to overcome. We explore the minds of the darkest criminals, and the light of the people who rise above them.